Death didn't come with a white light or a peaceful transition. It came with the deafening sound of screeching tires and my fiancé's laughter as he stood over my broken body, his arm wrapped tightly around my maid of honor. They thought they had won. They thought my family's fortune was finally theirs. But fate has a wicked, twisted sense of humor. I woke up exactly 3 months before my wedding day. Same bed, same diamond ring, same lying fiancé. Only this time, I'm holding the matches, and I'm ready to burn their entire world to ash. Pain was my last earthly companion, a blinding, agonizing shatter of ribs and spine on the unforgiving asphalt of Fifth Avenue. It had been raining that night. I remember the freezing droplets mixing with my own tears. Just 20 minutes prior, I had walked into the bridal suite at the Plaza Hotel, hoping to surprise Preston with a vintage Rolex I'd spent months tracking down for his wedding gift. Instead, the surprise was mine. I found him entangled with Evelyn, my stepsister, my lifelong confidant, the woman who had held my hand when my mother passed away. I remember the sickness that violently climbed up my throat as I listened to them through the slightly ajar door. They weren't just sleeping together. They were laughing at me. Preston, with his golden boy smile and Ivy League pedigree, was coldly detailing how they would siphon off the Harrington Media shares the moment the ink dried on our marriage certificate. Evelyn had giggled a sound that will haunt me for eternity, calling me a trust fund idiot who was too blind to see what was right in front of her. When I burst in, the screaming started. I didn't cry. I raged. I turned and ran desperate to get to my father to stop the wedding, to burn Preston's reputation to the ground. Preston chased me down the fire escape, grabbing my arm on the wet pavement outside. We struggled. He shoved me, hard. I stumbled backward into the active intersection. The headlights of the delivery truck were the last things I saw, followed by the sickening crunch of metal against bone. As my vision faded to black, Preston didn't call an ambulance. He just pulled Evelyn back onto the curb, whispered, "Problem solved," and walked away as my lungs took their final ragged breath. Then my eyes snapped open. I gasped, shooting up from a sea of silk sheets, my chest heaving as if I were still fighting for air. My hands flew to my ribs, expecting shattered bone, but found only flawless skin. I touched my face, my neck, my arms, intact. I was breathing. I was alive. "Bad dream, babe," a groggy, deep voice mumbled beside me. I froze. Every muscle in my body locked into a rigid block of ice. I slowly turned my head. There he was. Preston Caldwell. His messy blonde hair spread across my pillows, his heavy arm reaching out to pull me back against his chest. The smell of his Tom Ford Oud Wood cologne, a scent that used to give me butterflies, now hit my senses like raw sewage. My stomach violently churned. I scrambled out of the bed, my bare feet hitting the cold hardwood floor of my Upper East Side brownstone. I backed away until my shoulders hit the wall, my eyes darting frantically around the room. The date on my digital bedside clock glowed with a menacing clarity. June 14th, 2026. 3 months. Exactly 3 months before the wedding day. September 14th. My mind spun in the dizzying vortex of logic and impossibility. Had it been a nightmare? A wildly vivid premonition? But no, the memories were too visceral. The phantom pain of the truck's grill shattering my pelvis still echoed in my nerve endings. I remembered the exact words they said. I remembered the exact offshore Cayman accounts Preston mentioned during his post-coital gloating with Evelyn. I had been reborn, sent back, given a second chance. Clara, Preston sat up, rubbing his eyes, feigning that innocent boyish concern he had perfected over the 3 years we'd been together. "Are you okay? You're pale as a ghost. Come back to bed, sweetheart." Sweetheart. The word tasted like poison in the air. Survival instinct took over. If I screamed, if I confronted him now, he would gaslight me. He would tell everyone the stress of the wedding was making me hysterical. He might even push up his timeline to have me committed something he and Evelyn had casually joked about in that hotel room. I had to be smarter. I had to be colder. I forced my facial muscles to relax. I painted on a trembling, apologetic smile. "Just a nightmare, Preston. A really awful nightmare. I'm going to go make some tea. Go back to sleep." He grunted, already laying back down and pulling the duvet over his shoulders. "Okay, love you." "Love you too." I whispered the lie, burning my tongue. I walked downstairs to my sprawling marble kitchen, my hands shaking so violently I could barely hold the kettle. I didn't make tea. I sat in the dark at the kitchen island, staring out the bay window into the quiet New York streets. The shock slowly began to recede, replaced by a dark, simmering, magnificent rage. They wanted my company. They wanted my fortune. They were willing to step over my dead body to get it. I looked down at the 4-carat emerald-cut diamond on my left hand. Preston had bought it using a loan from my own father, a fact he swore was just a temporary cash flow issue at Caldwell Industries. I twisted the ring off my finger, laid it on the cool marble, and smiled. The old Clara, the naive, deeply loving woman who trusted everyone, died on that pavement. The Clara sitting in the dark kitchen was something else entirely. I was going to give Preston Caldwell and Evelyn Hayes the wedding of the century. And then I was going to destroy them. The next morning, I played my part flawlessly. I kissed Preston's cheek, poured his black coffee, and listened with rapt fake attention as he complained about his latest venture capital roadblock. He was trying to secure a massive government tech contract, one that would finally pull Caldwell Industries out of the shadow of its biggest rival, Rossi Enterprises. "If we can just leverage your father's media connections to push the PR campaign, the board will have no choice but to back my bid," Preston said, straightening his expensive silk tie. He looked at me in the mirror, his eyes calculating. "You'll talk to Arthur about it today, right?" At the fitting, Arthur was my father, and Preston only ever saw him as a bank. "Of course, darling," I chimed, adjusting his collar. "Anything to support my future husband." As soon as the front door clicked shut behind him, the smile dropped from my face. I immediately went to work. I couldn't just rely on my memories of their betrayal. I needed undeniable concrete proof. I needed evidence that would hold up not just in a court of public opinion, but in a legal battle that would strip Preston of everything he owned. I bypassed my usual security detail and took a yellow cab to a dingy office in Queens. I had read about Liam Gallagher, a former NYPD detective turned private investigator who specialized in high-stakes corporate espionage and infidelity. He was expensive, discreet, and ruthless. Liam sat across from me in a cramped office that smelled of stale coffee and old paper. He was a broad-shouldered man with a cynical gaze. I handed him a manila envelope containing $50,000 in unmarked cash. "I need eyes and ears in my own home," I told him, my voice steady. "And I need a comprehensive financial audit on Preston Caldwell. Specifically, look into shell companies registered in the Cayman Islands under the name Caldwell Hayes Holdings." Liam raised an eyebrow at the cash. "You're investigating your own fiancé 3 months before the wedding. Most women just call it off." "I'm not most women, Mr. Gallagher. And I want the hidden cameras installed today while I am out with my stepsister. master bedroom, living room, and his home office. No blind spots. That afternoon, I met Evelyn for a dress fitting at the Vera Wang Boutique in Manhattan. Seeing her was the hardest test of my newly forged composure. Evelyn walked in looking like a glowing angel, flowing blonde-hair designer sunglasses and a wide beaming smile. She threw her arms around me. "Clara, oh my God, you look exhausted. Is Preston keeping you up?" She teased, her eyes sparkling with a secret malice I had always mistaken for sisterly banter. "Wedding planning is just stressful." I lied smoothly, hugging her back. I imagined wrapping my hands around her neck, but I just smiled and handed her a glass of champagne. "Wait until you see the bridesmaid dresses, Evie. I want you to look absolutely perfect standing next to me." "I always do," she replied, taking a sip. Over the next 2 weeks, Liam's cameras did their job. Every time I left town for a wedding vendor meeting or stayed late at the Harrington media offices, Preston and Evelyn used my home as their personal playground. I sat in a locked hotel room on a burner laptop, watching the live feeds with cold detachment. I watched them in my bed. I watched them on my sofa. But more importantly, I recorded their conversations. Just let her sign the proxy voting rights over to me after the honeymoon, Preston was recorded saying on June 28th, pouring himself a glass of my father's expensive scotch. "Once I have control of the Harrington board, I'll force a merger with Caldwell. We'll dilute her father's shares to nothing. Then we can finally get rid of her." "I can't wait," Evelyn had replied, kissing his neck. "Playing the devoted sister is giving me a migraine. I saved every video, every audio clip, and every illegally acquired financial document Liam dug up into a heavily encrypted cloud drive. But destroying their reputations wasn't enough. I needed an exit strategy that would leave Preston financially ruined, legally bound, and utterly humiliated. I couldn't do it alone. I needed a shark. Enter Dominic Rossi. Dominic was the CEO of Rossi Enterprises. At 32, he was known as the Grim Reaper of Wall Street. He was fiercely intelligent, devastatingly handsome, and completely devoid of mercy when it came to business. He and Preston despised each other. Preston constantly tried to undercut Dominic, and Dominic viewed Preston as a talentless parasite. Getting a meeting with Dominic Rossi was nearly impossible, but I knew his routine. Every Thursday at 9 p.m., he had a private dinner in the underground VIP lounge of the Mercer Hotel. I arrived unannounced, slipping the head of security a thick wad of cash to look the other way. I walked into the dimly lit room. Dominic was sitting in a leather booth, swirling a glass of Barolo, reading a financial report on a tablet. He looked up, his dark, piercing eyes narrowing as he recognized me. Clara Harrington. Dominic set his voice a low, gravelly baritone that sent an unexpected shiver down my spine. "Preston's little bride. Did you get lost looking for the country club?" I slid into the booth across from him uninvited. "I'm not here to trade insults, Mr. Rossi. I'm here to offer you the head of Caldwell Industries on a silver platter." Dominic paused slowly, lowering his glass. The amusement in his eyes vanished, replaced by a sharp, predatory calculation. "Excuse me." I pulled a sleek black USB drive from my designer clutch and slid it across the mahogany table. On this drive is absolute, incontrovertible proof that Preston Caldwell is inflating his company's valuation using fraudulent shell accounts in the Caymans. He is planning to use my family's money to artificially pump his stock price just long enough to secure the Department of Defense tech contract you've been fighting him for. Dominic didn't touch the drive. He leaned forward, the faint scent of cedar and expensive leather wafting off him. "Why would you give me this? You're marrying the man in 2 months. unless this is some pathetic trap Preston cooked up. Preston isn't smart enough to cook up a trap, I said coldly. And I'm not marrying him. I'm destroying him. He's been sleeping with my maid of honor, and they are plotting a hostile takeover of my father's company. Dominic's eyes searched my face for a long moment. He was looking for a crack, a sign of weakness, a tear. He found nothing but absolute resolve. A slow, dangerous smile spread across his lips. You're a very dangerous woman, Clara. I'm a woman who woke up, I corrected. I will handle the public execution at my wedding, but I need you to handle the corporate slaughter. I want you to time the release of this financial data to the SEC at the exact moment I say, I do. I want his stock to crash to zero before we even reach the reception. And when it's done, I swallowed hard, looking him in the eye. I need an extraction. Dominic raised an eyebrow. An extraction? A helicopter, waiting on the roof of the plaza. When the dust settles, I need to disappear for a few weeks while my legal team mops up the blood. If I stay in New York, the press will eat me alive. My father is already secured at his estate in Geneva. I need a way out. Dominic picked up the USB drive, rolling it between his long, elegant fingers. He looked at me, a newfound respect burning in his dark eyes. We have a deal, Miss Harrington, Dominic said, raising his glass of wine in a mock toast. To the happy couple. I tapped my glass against his. To the widow. The weeks leading up to the wedding were a masterclass in psychological warfare. To the outside world, I was the picture of the blushing, stressed-out bride. I attended cake tastings with Evelyn, allowing her to pick her favorite flavor, a ridiculous raspberry torte that I secretly had the bakery swap to a lemon chiffon, just to watch her subtly frown on the day. I sat through meetings with our world-renowned wedding planner, Simone Delacroix, nodding eagerly as she discussed the floral arrangements of 10,000 white orchids imported from Holland. But behind closed doors, the trap was being meticulously laid. Liam Gallagher had assembled a dossier so thick it could choke a horse. Not only did we have the affair and the corporate fraud on tape, but Liam had uncovered that Preston was heavily in debt to several very unsavory private lenders. He was banking entirely on my dowry, the Harrington Trust, that unlocked upon my marriage to pay them off and avoid a pair of broken kneecaps. Knowing this made playing my role almost intoxicating. The rehearsal dinner took place at Tavern on the Green in Central Park 2 nights before the wedding. The room was bathed in golden fairy lights dripping with crystal and champagne. Preston stood at the head of the table, tapping his fork against his crystal flute. Family friends! Preston began flashing that $1,000,000 dead-eyed smile. He reached down and grabbed my hand, squeezing it tightly. Look at this woman. Clara is my rock, my North Star. Without her, I wouldn't be half the man I am today. She is the purest, most loyal person I've ever met, and I am the luckiest man alive to call her my wife. The room erupted in polite applause. I looked across the table. Evelyn was dabbing at her eyes with a lace handkerchief, playing the moved sister. Thank you, Preston, I said, standing up. I lifted my glass. I looked directly into Evelyn's eyes, then back to Preston. I truly believe that honesty and transparency are the foundation of any marriage. We have absolutely no secrets between us, do we, darling, you and Evelyn both? You've shown me exactly what loyalty looks like. Evelyn's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. Preston laughed nervously, clearly missing the subtext entirely. No secrets, babe. None at all. Good. I smiled warmly. Because I have a massive surprise planned for the ceremony. A video montage of our journey together. I've personally edited it. It's going to show everyone exactly who you really are." Preston beamed, kissing my cheek. "I can't wait." Later that evening, stepping out onto the terrace for some fresh air, I felt a heavy coat drape over my bare shoulders. I spun around. Dominic Rossi was leaning against the stone balustrade, holding a lit cigar, looking devastating in a bespoke charcoal suit. "What are you doing here?" I hissed, looking around frantically to ensure no one from the party saw him. "If Preston sees you—" "Preston is currently at the bar trying to convince my banking contacts that his tech prototype actually works." "He's an idiot," Dominic said smoothly, taking a drag of his cigar. The smoke curled around us in the cool September air. "I just came to confirm that the SEC package is primed. My lawyers have the trigger. The moment your little movie premieres, the DOJ and the SEC will receive the Caldwell files. Trading on his company will be halted within 10 minutes. "And the helicopter?" I asked, pulling his coat tighter around myself. It smelled like him. It was comforting grounding. "Fueled and waiting on the helipad of the plaza," Dominic confirmed. He stepped closer, his imposing frame towering over me. His eyes dropped to my lips for a fleeting second before meeting my gaze again. "You sure you can go through with this? Clara tomorrow is going to be a bloodbath. It's not too late to just walk away." I looked up at him. The memory of my bones breaking on the asphalt flashed in my mind. The memory of Preston walking away as I died. "I'm not walking away, Dominic. I'm walking through them." Dominic's lips curved into a genuine dark smile. "Good girl. I'll see you at the finish line." He took his coat back, his fingers briefly brushing against my bare arms, leaving a trail of unexpected heat, and vanished into the shadows of the park. The morning of September 14th dawned bright, crisp, and painfully beautiful. I sat in the sprawling bridal suite of the plaza, the very room where I had caught them in my past life. My loyal personal assistant, Sarah, who was fully in on the plan, zipped up my custom Vera Wang gown. It was a masterpiece of cascading silk and chantilly lace. I looked like a queen. I felt like an executioner. "The AV team is in place, Miss Harrington," Sarah whispered, handing me a small velvet pouch. I gave the head technician the 10 grand in cash. He's bypassed the hotel's network. The video is hardwired straight to the massive projector screens on either side of the altar. Once he hits play, nobody can stop it except him. "And Evelyn?" I asked, slipping on my diamond earrings. "Getting her makeup touched up in the adjoining room. She's been complaining about the champagne being too warm." I smiled. "Let her complain." A knock came at the door. Simone, the wedding planner, poked her headset-clad head in. "Clara, my dear, it's time. The guests are seated. The string quartet is ready. Are you?" I looked at my reflection one last time. No tears, no hesitation. Just the cold, hard reflection of a woman reborn from the ashes of her own murder. "I've never been more ready, Simone," I said, picking up my bouquet of white orchids. It was time to begin the show. The heavy gold-leaf doors of the plaza's grand ballroom stood before me, like the gates of purgatory. I could hear the muted, melodic swell of the string quartet inside, playing a bespoke orchestral arrangement of a modern pop song that Preston had insisted on to show how cultured yet contemporary he was. My father, Arthur Harrington, stood beside me. He looked devastatingly handsome in his tailored Brioni tuxedo, his silver hair perfectly coiffed. His eyes were shining with unshed tears as he looked at me, completely unaware that he was walking his only daughter into a slaughterhouse. "You look exactly like your mother," he whispered, his voice catching in his throat. He reached over, gently squeezing my gloved hand. "She would be so incredibly proud of you today, Clara. Preston is a good man. He'll take care of you." A sharp pang of guilt pierced my chest, but I quickly smothered it in the cold ice of my resolve. I couldn't tell my father the truth beforehand. Arthur Harrington was an old-school media baron with a fierce, protective temper. If he had known that Preston was not only sleeping with his stepdaughter, but also plotting a hostile takeover to strip him of his life's work, my father would have killed him. Literally. I needed this done legally, publicly, and irreversibly. "Thank you, Dad." I replied, my voice steady, betraying none of the venom pumping through my veins. "Today is going to be unforgettable." The grand doors swung open. The immediate scent of 10,000 white Holland orchids hit me like a physical wave. The ballroom was breathtaking, transformed into a pristine, ethereal forest of crystal chandeliers and cascading silk. Seated in the velvet-lined mahogany pews were 300 of the most powerful people on the eastern seaboard. Senators, tech billionaires, media moguls, and high society matriarchs all turned in unison, their faces glowing with polite adoration. And at the end of the long mirrored aisle stood my executioner. Preston Caldwell looked every inch the perfect groom. He wore a midnight blue bespoke tuxedo, a vintage Patek Philippe watch gleaming on his wrist, his golden hair styled with effortless precision. When he saw me, he offered that signature megawatt smile, the one that had charmed venture capitalists and fooled me for 3 years. Standing just to his left was Evelyn, my beautiful, treacherous stepsister. She wore a stunning custom blush pink gown that clung to her curves. Her blonde hair swept up into an intricate chignon. She was dabbing at the corners of her eyes with a lace handkerchief playing the role of the overwhelmed, supportive maid of honor to perfection. "Keep smiling," I told myself as I took the first step forward. Every step is a nail in their coffin. The walk down the aisle felt like moving through thick water. With every click of my heels against the mirrored floor, the memories of my previous life flashed behind my eyes. I felt the phantom grip of Preston's hand shoving me on the fire escape. I heard the sickening screech of the delivery truck's tires. I felt the icy rain on my shattered body. By the time I reached the altar, my smile was no longer an act. It was a mask of pure, unadulterated anticipation. My father placed my hand in Preston's. "Take care of my girl, Preston," Arthur said, his voice thick with emotion. "With my life, Arthur?" Preston lied smoothly, squeezing my fingers. He leaned in as my father stepped back, whispering, "You look absolutely incredible, babe. Let's make this official." I simply nodded, my eyes locking onto his. Reverend Miller, a distinguished man with a booming theatrical voice, stepped up to the podium. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today in the sight of God and these witnesses to join Clara and Preston in holy matrimony." The Reverend spoke for 10 minutes, weaving beautiful metaphors about trust, loyalty, and building an empire of love. I let him speak. I let the audience settle into the romantic lull of the ceremony. I looked over at Evelyn, who offered me a sweet, trembling smile. I smiled back. And now, as they prepare to exchange their vows, affirming their eternal commitment to one another, Reverend Miller continued, closing his leather-bound Bible. "Preston and Clara have asked to share a few personal words." Preston cleared his throat, adjusting his lapels. He opened his mouth to deliver the vows I knew his PR team had written for him. I held up my hand, cutting him off before a single syllable could leave his lips. Actually, I announced, my voice echoing through the lapel microphone hidden in the bodice of my gown. The sound rang out crisp and clear across the silent ballroom. "Before we make any promises to God, I have a surprise." Preston blinked, thrown off script. "Clara, what are you—" "I told you at the rehearsal dinner, darling," I said, turning to face the crowd. I felt the collective gaze of 300 elites locked onto me. "I believe a marriage is built on absolute transparency. No secrets, which is why I've prepared a short film to document exactly how we got here today. A testament to Preston's loyalty, and to the unwavering support of my maid of honor, Evelyn." Evelyn beamed at the mention of her name, puffing out her chest slightly. Preston chuckled, though I could see a flicker of annoyance in his eyes at the deviation from the schedule. "Sarah," I called out, looking toward the back of the room where my assistant stood. "Hit play." The massive floor-to-ceiling white drapes behind the altar suddenly served a dual purpose, as dual high-definition laser projectors clicked on, bathing the front of the ballroom in a stark cinematic glow. The video began innocently enough, a montage of photos from our early dating years. Preston and I in Paris, Evelyn and I at a charity gala. A soft, romantic piano melody played in the background. The crowd let out a collective soft, "Oh!" Then the screen cut to black. The romantic music abruptly died. The silence in the ballroom was absolute. When the footage flickered back to life, the high-definition gloss was gone, replaced by the crisp, undeniable reality of a hidden infrared camera. The timestamp in the corner read, July 12th, 2026, 2:14 p.m. The location was unmistakable to anyone who knew me. It was the master bedroom of my Upper East Side brownstone. On the massive screens, 10 feet tall, Preston Caldwell and Evelyn Hayes were tangled in my silk sheets, violently ripping each other's clothes off. A collective deafening gasp ripped through the ballroom. 300 guests inhaled sharply at the exact same moment. "Turn it off!" Preston barked, his face instantly draining of all color. He spun around frantically, waving his arms at the AV booth. "Cut the feed! Cut it now!" But the AV booth was locked, and the technician was counting a stack of my money. The audio kicked in. It wasn't just visual. The microphones Liam had installed were top tier. Evelyn's breathless giggles echoed through the ballroom speakers with horrifying clarity. "Oh God, Prez, what if Clara comes home?" the 10-foot-tall Evelyn moaned on screen. "She won't. The idiot is at a cake tasting. She'll be gone for hours." Preston's voice boomed back, filled with a sneering arrogance that made several women in the front row visibly recoil. At the altar, Evelyn staggered backward, the blush draining from her face, leaving her looking like a terrified ghost. She covered her mouth, her eyes wide, with unadulterated panic, scanning the horrified faces of the New York elite. "Clara." Preston turned to me, his hands shaking, his voice a pathetic high-pitched squeak. This is a deep fake. It's AI. Someone is trying to frame me." "Shh," I whispered, stepping away from him. "The best part is coming." The video on the screen jump cut to a new date, August 4th, 2026. This time it was Preston's home office. He was sitting at his desk, a glass of whiskey in hand, with Evelyn sitting on his lap. He was holding up a stack of financial documents. I finally got the offshore accounts routed through the Cayman Shell Company. The recorded Preston set his voice echoing over the dead silent, horrified crowd. "Caldwell Hayes Holdings is fully active. Once the Harrington Trust money hits my account on the wedding day, we transfer it offshore, inflate Caldwell Industries stock, and secure the DoD contract. Then I leverage my new shares to push Arthur out of his own company." "You're going to bankrupt her father?" Evelyn asked on screen, sounding positively thrilled. "I'm going to ruin him," Preston laughed coldly. Arthur Harrington is a dinosaur, and his daughter is just a naive little checkbook that's going to fund my empire." The reaction in the room was atomic. Cheating was a scandal. But in this room, full of cutthroat billionaires and ruthless investors plotting corporate fraud and the hostile destruction of a beloved titan like Arthur Harrington, was a cardinal sin. It was a declarations vaunt. "You son of a bitch." The roar came from the front row. My father Arthur surged forward, his face purple with absolute fury. He lunged at Preston, grabbing him by the collar of his expensive tuxedo and violently shoving him backward into the floral archway. Thousands of white orchids came crashing down around them. "Dad, stop!" I yelled, not out of concern for Preston, but to keep my father from catching an assault charge. "Arthur, please, it's fake. I swear to God." Preston sobbed desperately, trying to pry my father's hands off his throat. Evelyn was hyperventilating, backing away toward the side exit, tears ruining her perfectly applied makeup. "Arthur, please. We didn't mean. Don't you ever speak to me again, you treacherous little whore," Arthur bellowed, turning his wrath on Evelyn. "I took you in. I raised you. You are dead to me, both of you." The ballroom had erupted into absolute pandemonium. Cell phones were already out. Flashes were going off. The mayor's security detail was ushering him out the side doors to avoid the PR fallout. Preston violently shoved my father away, his panic morphing into a feral, desperate rage. He turned his wild eyes onto me. The charming facade was completely gone, replaced by the monster I had met on the fire escape in my first life. "You did this!" Preston screamed, lunging toward me with his fists clenched. "I'll kill you, you crazy bitch!" He didn't make it 2 steps. Before Preston could even get within arm's reach of me, a massive figure in a charcoal suit materialized from the chaos of the second row. Dominic Rossi moved with terrifying speed. He stepped smoothly between me and Preston, grabbing Preston's outstretched wrist, twisting it sharply, and driving his other hand into Preston's chest. Preston gagged, stumbling backward and crashing hard onto the marble steps of the altar. Dominic stood over him, adjusting his perfectly tailored cuffs, looking down at Preston like he was a piece of gum scraped off a shoe. "Touch her," Dominic said, his gravelly voice slicing through the screaming crowd, "and I will break every bone in your hands before I throw you out of that stained glass window." "Understood." Preston scrambled backward like a pathetic cornered rat staring up at the CEO he had spent years trying to defeat. "Rossi? What? What are you doing here?" "I'm here for the fireworks." Dominic smirked, checking his gold Cartier watch. "Speaking of which, check your phone, Caldwell. I believe you have a margin call." Right on cue, a strange, terrifying symphony began to ripple through the grand ballroom. It started as a few scattered vibrations, then rapidly escalated into a chaotic chorus of pings, chimes, and ringtones. Every CEO, every investor, every Wall Street heavy hitter in the pews was getting an alert at the exact same moment. A senator in the third row stared at his phone, his jaw dropping. Good God! Caldwell Industries just plummeted 40%. "Trading has been halted," someone else yelled from the back. Preston's phone, tucked inside his tuxedo pocket, began to ring furiously. He pulled it out with trembling hands. His eyes widened to the size of dinner plates as he read the notifications lighting up his screen. Breaking SEC freezes. Assets of Caldwell Industries amid massive fraud allegations. DOJ raids Manhattan headquarters of tech. CEO Preston Caldwell. Dominic leaned down, dropping a glossy legal folder right onto Preston's lap. My team sent the unredacted files from your little Cayman Shell company to the SEC, the FBI, and the Wall Street Journal simultaneously 10 minutes ago. Your stock is currently trading at a fraction of a penny. Your board just convened an emergency meeting to strip you of your title. You're finished, Preston. You're broke, you're exposed, and you're going to federal prison. Preston looked like he was having a stroke. He looked from his phone to Dominic and finally up at me. The realization of what I had done, the sheer apocalyptic scale of my revenge, finally registered in his eyes. Clara, Preston choked out, dropping his phone on the floor. He fell to his knees, literally crawling toward the hem of my Vera Wang gown. Please, Clara, baby, I love you. It was just a mistake. I'll do anything. Please, you have to call them off. I looked down at him. The man who had laughed as I died. The man who had stood over my broken body and called me a problem solved. I felt absolutely nothing but cold, magnificent triumph. I'd say, I'll see you in hell, Preston, I said smoothly, picking up my bouquet of orchids. But I've already been there, and I left you the keys. I turned my back on him. Let's go, Dominic said, placing a firm protective hand on the small of my back. We walked down the aisle together, moving against the tide of screaming, gossiping, frantic elites. Guests parted for us like the Red Sea. I saw Evelyn cowering in the corner, sobbing hysterically, as security guards, directed by my furious father, began to forcibly escort her out of the building. My father locked eyes with me as I passed. I gave him a curt nod. He nodded back, his eyes blazing with a mixture of shock, awe, and a grim understanding. He would be fine. I had protected his empire. You crazy bitch, I'll ruin you. Preston's deranged screams echoed behind us, followed immediately by the sound of scuffling as hotel security pinned him to the floor. Dominic and I burst through the heavy ballroom doors, leaving the chaos behind. We didn't stop. We sprinted down the carpeted corridors of the plaza, the heavy skirts of my wedding dress swishing furiously against the floorboards. Service elevator, this way, Dominic barked, pulling me down a narrow hallway. He swiped a key card he had undoubtedly bribed someone for, and the metal doors slid open. We stepped in, and Dominic hit the button for the roof. As the elevator jolted upward, I leaned against the metal wall, my chest heaving, adrenaline flooding my system like liquid fire. I looked at Dominic. He was staring at me, a wild, exhilarating energy radiating from his dark eyes. That, Dominic breathed a rare, genuine grin breaking across his handsome face, was the most terrifying and spectacular thing I have ever witnessed in my entire life. I couldn't help it. A laugh bubbled up from my chest, sharp and loud. Did you see his face when you dropped the folder? I'm going to frame that memory and hang it in my office. Dominic chuckled, leaning closer. The tension between us was electric, fueled by the adrenaline of the kill. The elevator dinged and the doors slid open to the roaring, concussive sound of helicopter blades slicing through the cool September air. We ran out onto the helipad. A sleek black Augusta Westland chopper was waiting the pilot, giving us a thumbs up from the cockpit. Dominic helped me climb in the wind from the rotors, whipping my veil around my face. He climbed in after me, sliding the heavy door shut instantly, muting the deafening roar of the engine. As I buckled myself into the leather seat, I looked out the reinforced window. Down below, on the streets of Manhattan, I could already see a swarm of black FBI Suburbans pulling up to the front entrance of the plaza. News vans were screeching to a halt on the curb. It was a circus. And I was the ringmaster who had just set the tent on fire. Champagne, I turned back. Dominic was holding out two crystal flutes, popping the cork on a bottle of vintage Dom Perignon. "To narrow escapes," I said, taking the glass. "To absolute destruction," Dominic countered, clinking his glass against mine. The helicopter lifted off, banking sharply over Central Park. I looked down one last time, watching the city shrink beneath us. The Clara who had loved Preston Caldwell was buried down there somewhere, lost in the concrete and the rain of a past life. But the Clara sitting in the sky, sipping champagne with a billionaire shark, was very much alive. And for the first time in 3 months, I finally felt like I could breathe. Manhattan faded into a glittering grid of lights beneath us as the Augusta Westland helicopter banked toward New Jersey. The adrenaline that had propelled me down the aisle through the grand ballroom and up to the roof of the plaza was finally beginning to metabolize, leaving behind a bone-deep, glorious exhaustion. I sank into the plush leather seat, my heavy Vera Wang gown pooling around me like a deflated parachute. Teterboro Airport. Dominic instructed the pilot over the headset, his voice a calm rumble over the rhythmic thumping of the rotors. He turned to me, handing me a sleek black iPad. "You might want to see this. The internet is having an absolute meltdown." I took the tablet. The screen displayed the digital front page of the New York Times. The headline practically screamed in bold font, "Caldwell Collapse. SEC halts trading as CEO Preston Caldwell implicated in massive wire fraud at his own wedding." Below it, the New York Post was far less diplomatic. "Runaway bride nukes. Cheating groom. Plaza wedding ends in FBI raid." There was already a blurry cell phone-captured photo of Preston being shoved into the back of a federal SUV. His bespoke tuxedo disheveled, his face twisted in a mask of absolute terror. A sound escaped my throat, a laugh so pure and unburdened it brought tears to my eyes. "He looks like a rat caught in a trap," I whispered, swiping through the articles. "That's because he is," Dominic said, leaning back and watching me with an intensity that made the small cabin feel even smaller. My inside contact at the Department of Justice just texted. They found the Cayman Island ledgers on a secure server in his office. He's looking at 20 years for the wire fraud alone. Add in corporate espionage, tax evasion, and conspiracy. Preston will be lucky if he sees the outside of a federal penitentiary before his hair turns white. "Good," I murmured, staring at the screen. The phantom pains of my broken ribs, the memories of the asphalt, and the rain finally silenced entirely. The debt had been paid. The helicopter touched down on the private tarmac at Teterboro Airport, where Dominic's customized Bombardier Global 7500 was already fueled and waiting, its engines whining with raw power. We bypassed customs, entirely the perks of flying with a billionaire whose security clearance rivaled heads of state. Once on board the jet, the sheer luxury of Dominic's world enveloped me. The cabin was a masterpiece of dark walnut cream leather and brushed steel. A flight attendant silently offered us hot towels and champagne, but Dominic waved her away. "Give us the room, Maria, and prepare the master suite for Miss Harrington." "Right away, Mr. Rossi." Dominic walked over to a dark wood cabinet, pulling out a bottle of Macallan 25 and pouring 2 generous fingers into heavy crystal tumblers. He handed me one. "You can't stay in that dress for a 9-hour flight to Milan." He noted his dark eyes trailing over the intricate Chantilly lace. "There are some clothes in the suite. My sister leaves things here occasionally. They should fit." "Milan?" I asked, taking a slow sip of the scotch. The liquid fire grounded me. "Lake Como, actually," he corrected, loosening his silk tie and unbuttoning the top of his collar. I own a private estate near Bellagio, accessible only by boat or private funicular. It has a dedicated security detail and a heavily encrypted satellite network. The paparazzi won't find you, and the U.S. press can't touch you. You need to vanish while your father's legal team from Skadden Arps sweeps up the mess in New York. I looked at him, truly looked at him, for the first time since this insane alliance had begun. Dominic Rossi was a ruthless corporate raider, a man known for dismantling legacy companies with the emotionless precision of a surgeon. Yet here he was, shielding me from the fallout of my own personal nuclear strike. "Why are you doing this, Dominic?" I asked quietly. "You have his company. You sent the files to the SEC. You won. You didn't have to provide the helicopter or the villa." Dominic paused, taking a slow drink of his scotch. He stepped closer, invading my personal space just enough to make my pulse jump. Preston Caldwell was a parasite. I would have crushed him eventually. But watching you do it, watching you orchestrate his absolute annihilation while wearing a white dress that was the most magnificent display of power I've ever seen. I respect power, Clara, and I protect my investments. I'm an investment. You're the future CEO of Harrington Media. He stated, his gaze dropping to my lips. And I have a feeling you and I are going to do extraordinary things together. Go change. Get some sleep. I retreated to the master suite at the back of the jet. Stripping off the Vera Wang gown felt like shedding a dead skin. I left the $50,000 dress in a crumpled heap on the floor and pulled on a set of cashmere Loro Piana loungewear I found in the mahogany closet. Falling into the California king bed, lulled by the hum of the jet engines, I slept without dreaming for the first time in 3 months. I woke up to the blinding golden sunlight of the Italian Alps. Dominic's villa in Lake Como was less of a house and more of a fortress disguised as a Renaissance palace. Carved into the side of a cliff overlooking the sapphire waters of the lake, Villa del Drago was surrounded by terraced gardens of olive trees and patrolled by discreet armed security guards. For the first week, I was a ghost. I spent my days on the sprawling stone terrace wrapped in cashmere blankets, drinking espresso and breathing in the crisp mountain air. Dominic worked out of his home office, giving me the space I needed to decompress. But every evening we met for dinner in the grand dining room. Over plates of handmade truffle risotto and bottles of Barolo, we traded battle strategies. I learned about his childhood, growing up the ruthless heir to a shipping magnate, and he learned about my mother's death, which had left my father overly protective and blind to the snakes in our inner circle. We were monitoring the fallout in New York through encrypted video calls with my legal team. Jonathan Pierce, the senior partner at Skadden, updated us daily. "It's a bloodbath, Clara," Jonathan said, during a call on our 10th day in Italy, his face appearing on the massive flat screen in Dominic's study. Preston's bail was denied. The judge deemed him a massive flight risk after we handed over the Cayman Island routing numbers. He's sitting in Rikers Island right now, awaiting trial. I swirled my wine glass, a vicious smile playing on my lips. "And Evelyn," Jonathan chuckled darkly. "Arthur completely excommunicated her. He froze all her trust accounts and canceled her black cards. She tried to sell an exclusive tell-all interview to Vanity Fair and Vogue, painting herself as a victim of Preston's manipulation. But Arthur called in his favors. Every major publication in the country has blacklisted her. She was last seen moving into a 2-star motel in Secaucus, New Jersey, after her Upper East Side landlord evicted her. Make sure she stays there, I instructed coldly. If she tries to get a job at any respectable PR or media firm, I want a quiet call made to the hiring manager." "Understood," Jonathan nodded. "Now on to Caldwell Industries. The stock has flatlined. They are filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy tomorrow morning to avoid total liquidation." Dominic, who had been leaning against the oak bookshelf, suddenly stepped into the frame. "Jonathan, trigger the proxy firm. I want Rossi Enterprises to purchase Caldwell's proprietary tech patents and remaining assets for pennies on the dollar. But structure the buyout through the shell company we discussed." "The one registered under Miss Harrington's name?" Jonathan asked, raising an eyebrow. "Exactly," Dominic smirked. "When the dust settles, Clara will be the majority owner of what's left of her ex-fiancé's empire." After we ended the call, I looked at Dominic in shock. "You're putting the Caldwell assets in my name. Those patents are worth millions, even with the company bankrupt. Consider it a wedding gift," Dominic said softly, walking over to the leather sofa where I was sitting. He sat down next to me, the proximity suddenly electric. "Besides, you earned it. You were the bait, the trap, and the executioner." I looked into his eyes, seeing the dark, swirling depths of a man who understood the monsters in the world, because he was the apex predator among them. In my past life, I had chosen a golden retriever who turned out to be a rabid cur. Now I was sitting next to a wolf, and I felt entirely safe. "I couldn't have done it without you, Dominic." I whispered, the air between us suddenly heavy, charged with a magnetic pull that had been building since the night at the Mercer Hotel. Dominic reached up, his long, warm fingers gently tracing the line of my jaw. "You would have found a way, Clara. You're fire. I just helped you direct the burn." He leaned in, and I didn't pull away. When his lips met mine, it wasn't hesitant or gentle. It was a collision. It was consuming, fierce, and desperately passionate. My hands tangled in his dark hair as he pulled me into his lap, the kiss deepening into something wild and undeniable. All the rage, the fear, the meticulously calculated control of the past 3 months melted away, replaced by a blinding, white-hot desire. We weren't just business partners anymore. We were partners in absolute devastation. 4 months passed. The snow melted from the peaks of the Italian Alps, and the brutal New York winter gave way to a crisp, biting spring. The media storm had finally reduced from a Category 5 hurricane to a manageable drizzle. The public had moved on to the next scandal, but the financial district still whispered my name with a mixture of reverence and terror. It was time to go home. We flew back into Teterboro on a rainy Tuesday morning. I didn't return to the Upper East Side brownstone. I had instructed my real estate broker to sell it fully furnished the day after the wedding. Instead, Dominic's driver took us straight to his sprawling multi-level penthouse overlooking Central Park. My father was waiting for us in the private elevator lobby. When the doors opened, Arthur Harrington looked older, but there was a fierce, renewed strength in his posture. He pulled me into a crushing hug, burying his face in my hair. "I missed you, kid," my dad whispered, his voice thick. "I missed you too, Dad." I pulled back, smiling at him. "Is the company secure?" "More than secure." Arthur grinned, shaking Dominic's hand firmly. "With Rossi Enterprises backing us, our stock is up 30%. We completely absorbed Caldwell's market share. But Clara," the district attorney called. "Preston is taking a plea deal tomorrow. The prosecution wants you there for the victim impact statement before the judge hands down the sentence." I felt Dominic's hand rest reassuringly on the small of my back. "I'll be there," I said, my voice like steel. The next morning, the federal courthouse in Lower Manhattan was swarming with reporters. Dominic's security detail carved a path through the flashing cameras and shouting journalists, escorting me safely into the heavy oak-paneled courtroom. I wore a sharply tailored blood-red Alexander McQueen power suit, my hair pulled back into a severe, elegant knot. I was no longer the soft, naive girl in a white wedding dress. I was the architect of ruin. I took my seat in the front row, Dominic sitting imposing and silent beside me. A side door opened, and 2 federal marshals led Preston Caldwell into the room. The breath caught in my throat, not out of pity, but out of sheer shock at his physical deterioration. The Golden Boy, CEO, was gone. Preston looked hollowed out, his skin a sickly pale gray under the fluorescent lights. His trademark blonde hair was greasy and thinning, and the orange prison jumpsuit hung loosely off his gaunt frame. The swagger was dead. The arrogance had been meticulously crushed out of him by 6 months in federal lockup. He didn't look at the gallery until he was forced to sit at the defense table. When he finally turned his head, his hollow eyes met mine. I didn't flinch. I didn't sneer. I just stared at him with absolute freezing apathy. The judge, a stern-faced woman with zero patience for Wall Street criminals, banged her gavel. Mr. Caldwell, you have agreed to plead guilty to 2 counts of wire fraud, 1 count of conspiracy, to commit corporate espionage, and 1 count of tax evasion. In exchange, the prosecution has agreed to a recommended sentence. However, before I accept this plea, the court recognizes Ms. Clara Harrington for a victim impact statement. I stood up smoothly, adjusting the cuffs of my suit. The courtroom was dead silent. Every reporter's pen hovered over their notepads. I walked to the podium, looking directly at Preston. He was trembling. "Your Honor," I began, my voice clear, steady, and amplified by the microphone. 3 years ago, I met a man who promised me a partnership. He promised loyalty, transparency, and a future. Instead, he systematically plotted to use my family's legacy to cover his own colossal failures. I paused, letting the words hang in the heavy air. Preston Caldwell is not a mastermind. I continued, my eyes locking onto his terrified face. He is a coward who hid behind shell companies and stolen affection. He violated my home. He conspired with my own family member to steal my inheritance, and he attempted to destroy a media empire that my father spent his entire life building. Preston lowered his head, staring at his shackled wrists, his shoulders shaking, as silent tears finally fell. "But I am not here to ask for your pity, Your Honor," I said, my voice hardening into a blade. "Because Preston Caldwell did not destroy me. He simply woke me up. I am here to ensure that this man who tried to steal my future is permanently denied his own." I asked the court to impose the maximum penalty allowed by the plea agreement. Let his cell be a reminder that arrogance is not a business strategy, and betrayal has a very, very steep price. I turned on my heel and walked back to my seat, slipping my hand into Dominic's. He squeezed my fingers, his thumb brushing over my knuckles in silent, fierce approval. The judge nodded, adjusting her glasses. "Thank you, Ms. Harrington. Mr. Caldwell, please stand." Preston stood on shaky legs, supported by his public defender. His expensive defense team had abandoned him the moment his assets were frozen. "Preston Caldwell, for the crimes of systemic financial fraud and conspiracy. I sentence you to 14 years in a federal penitentiary without the possibility of parole for a minimum of 10 years, followed by full financial restitution to the Harrington Trust." The gavel slammed down like a gunshot. Court is adjourned. Marshals remand the prisoner. As the marshals grabbed his arms, Preston looked back at me one last time. There was no rage left, only a pathetic broken plea for mercy that I would never give him. "Clara," he mouthed silently. I looked right through him, turned to Dominic, and smiled. "Take me to the office. We have a merger to announce." A year later, the skyline of Manhattan glittered outside the floor-to-ceiling windows of the newly minted Rossi Harrington Tower. The grand ballroom of the Pierre Hotel was packed, but this time it wasn't for a wedding. It was the annual Harrington Media Charity Gala, co-hosted by Rossi Enterprises. The city's elite had gathered to celebrate the most powerful corporate union of the decade. I stood near the grand staircase holding a flute of champagne. I wore a backless midnight blue Tom Ford gown that fit like liquid glass. Around my neck rested a stunning diamond necklace, a gift from Dominic, to celebrate my official appointment as CEO of Harrington Media following my father's quiet transition to chairman of the board. "You look bored," a dark, familiar voice murmured near my ear. I turned, a genuine smile breaking across my face as Dominic wrapped an arm around my waist, pulling me flush against his side. He was wearing a classic black tuxedo, looking dangerous, devastating, and entirely mine. "Just reflecting," I said, leaning my head against his shoulder. "Liam Gallagher sent me a report this morning." Dominic raised an eyebrow, taking a sip of his bourbon. "On the ex-fiancé." "On Evelyn, actually," I corrected. "She was fired from her third waitress job in Hoboken. Apparently, she has a terrible attitude. She tried calling my father's office last week, begging for a loan. Security blocked the number. A tragic fall from grace." Dominic deadpanned his eyes, devoid of sympathy. "And Preston transferred to a medium security facility in upstate New York. He's working in the prison laundry room, earning 12 cents an hour. A fair market wage for his skill level," Dominic noted, pressing a kiss to my temple. "They are in the past, Clara. Dust under your shoes. Look around you." I swept my gaze over the glittering ballroom. Wall Street titans, tech innovators, and media moguls were all mingling, desperate for a few minutes of our time. We had taken the ashes of Preston's betrayal and forged an empire that was virtually untouchable. I heard a rumor today, the mayor of New York said, approaching us with a beaming smile and a raised glass. "They say Rossi Enterprises and Harrington Media are planning a permanent merger. Is there a ring in the future?" Dominic looked down at me, his dark eyes flashing with a predatory, possessive warmth that still made my heart race. "When Clara and I sign a contract, Mr. Mayor," Dominic said smoothly, his hand tightening on my waist, "it's for life. But we don't need a church to prove we own the world. We just need a boardroom." I laughed, raising my glass to meet the mayor's. My first life ended on the cold, wet pavement of Fifth Avenue, broken and betrayed by the people I loved most. But standing here enveloped in power, wealth, and the fiercely loyal embrace of a man who saw me as an equal, I knew one absolute truth. Rebirth wasn't about getting a second chance to be a better person. It was about getting a second chance to be the one holding the match. And as I looked out over the empire I had built from the ruins of my own murder, I knew the fire was only just beginning. If you enjoyed this story of ultimate revenge, high-stakes billionaire drama, and a fierce rebirth, hit that like button right now. Don't forget to share this video with anyone who loves a powerful, unapologetic female lead, tearing down the people who wronged her. Drop a comment below. Would you have exposed your cheating fiancé at the altar or handled it privately? I want to know your thoughts. Make sure you subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss out on our daily thrilling story uploads. Let's keep the drama going. See you in the next video.